Don't talk. Homeless man saved female Navy. After he caught something shocking on the street. Before we dive in, pause for a moment and tell me something. Where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Maybe it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France. Don't just watch quietly, drop a comment below, and let's see how far this story reaches across the world. Now, lean in and let's begin. The night in Norfolk was restless. Rain slicked down the broken sidewalks, reflecting neon from bars that never seemed to close. Cars passed in fits, their engines growling like hungry dogs. On a forgotten corner, near a row of dumpsters that stank of stale beer and rotting lettuce, a man pulled his tattered coat tighter. His name was Gideon, a homeless veteran with eyes that had seen deserts burn and jungles rot, now staring at puddles as if they might offer an answer. People walked past him, some tossing coins, others tossing insults. Gideon didn't care. He kept his silence, as if speaking might drag ghosts back from the battlefield. Then something cut through the fog, boots clattering, hurried steps, and a female voice hissing, "Don't talk." His head turned. A woman in a navy dress uniform stumbled into the alley, her hat gone, hair soaked, face pale. She wasn't drunk. No, this was something else. Her name, though Gideon would not know it yet, was Lieutenant Commander Aria Valon. She pressed her back to the wall, chest heaving, eyes darting down the street as if hunted. Gideon could smell the adrenaline on her. He knew that look. It was survival. She noticed him in the shadows and flinched. "Don't talk," she whispered again, holding a finger to her lips. Then she pressed a small flash drive into his trembling hand before he could refuse. "If they see me with this, I'm dead. You weren't here. You didn't see me." Rain hammered between them. Before Gideon could ask who they were, headlights flooded the alley mouth, cutting the dark like a blade. Three men spilled out of a black SUV. They weren't Navy, not by their movements. Too loose, too predatory. Their jackets bulged heavy with what Gideon recognized instantly. Pistols, compact, suppressed. Arya's gaze flicked to him once, pleading without words. Gideon tucked the flash drive into the lining of his ragged coat, his heart thudding like artillery in his chest. He hadn't asked for this war, but war had just found him again. The men scanned the alley, eyes sharp, voices low. "You seen a woman? Navy officer, about yay tall?" Gideon slouched deeper into the shadows, curling like a man too broken to notice. One of the men sneered at him, spat near his boots, and moved on. Arya held her breath so long Gideon feared she'd collapse. They searched, cursed, then slid back into their SUV and peeled off, taillights glowing like embers swallowed by the night. When silence returned, Arya dropped to her knees, soaked and shaking. Gideon studied her, not just an officer, but one carrying the weight of something lethal. "Why me?" he croaked at last, his voice a gravel rarely heard. Her eyes locked onto his, glassy yet fierce. "Because no one looks twice at a homeless man. That makes you invisible. And right now, I need invisible." She grabbed his wrist, urgent. "If you value your country, if you've ever worn the uniform, don't let this out of your sight. Promise me." Gideon felt old scars ache beneath his coat sleeve. He hadn't been called soldier in years, yet the fire of it hadn't fully gone cold. He gave a slow nod. "All right." Her shoulders sagged as if that single word kept her upright, but before he could ask what was on the drive, a sound cracked the night. A gunshot. Close. Too close. Glass shattered above them. Arya shoved Gideon down just as a second shot rang, sparks flying from metal piping. "They saw me!" she hissed, eyes blazing. Gideon's pulse roared in his ears. He hadn't carried a weapon in years, hadn't been on mission since the sand swallowed his brothers overseas. But instinct returned like a ghost. He grabbed a rusted pipe from the ground, crouched low. More shots tore into the alley, deliberate, controlled. Whoever they were, they weren't amateurs. Gideon scanned the rooftops, shadows shifting against the storm. His body, worn by years of street decay, suddenly remembered the rhythm of survival. Beside him, Arya gritted her teeth. unholstered a compact sidearm from beneath her jacket. The muzzle glinted silver under the rain. She whispered, "Don't talk, just move when I do." And in that instant, Gideon realized, whatever he had stumbled into was bigger than her, bigger than both of them. The war he thought had ended was about to begin again, right here in the alley. Rain still poured, a curtain of noise masking the fading echo of gunfire. Gideon pressed himself against the cold brick, his breath misting in the chill night air. Arya crouched low, her weapon drawn steady, scanning the rooftops. The shadows were silent again. But silence after gunshots was never safety. It was the calm before another strike. Gideon felt the flash drive burn against his chest where he had hidden it. He didn't know what was on it, but he knew it mattered. Arya's gaze flicked to him. "You're staying alive because of that drive. Don't lose it." Gideon almost laughed, a dry rasp that stuck in his throat. He had nothing. No bed, no home, no name worth speaking. And yet, in one storm-soaked moment, he carried something powerful enough to get a Navy officer hunted. The irony was almost bitter. Arya moved first, guiding him deeper into the alley until they slipped out through a chain-link gate. The SUV had circled back, headlights sweeping the street like spotlights. "Stay behind me," she ordered, voice sharp but shaking slightly at the edges. Gideon obeyed, though the years of following orders weighed heavy on him. Every nerve felt alive again, every instinct buzzing. They ducked into an abandoned laundromat, windows broken, machines rusted. Arya slid behind one of the overturned dryers and checked her weapon. Gideon sank to the floor, back against peeling paint. For a moment, they just listened, to the storm outside, to their pounding hearts. Then Arya spoke, quieter now, her voice raw. "They're not supposed to know. This drive, it's evidence. Names, accounts, deals made under the table, corruption inside the Navy. My commanding officer is part of it." Her eyes lifted to his, steady and fierce. "If they catch me, I vanish. If they catch you with it, they'll kill you too." Gideon's stomach twisted. He had lived invisible for so long, sleeping under bridges, scrounging meals, watching the world forget him. But now invisibility was his weapon. He studied Arya, soaked uniform clinging to her like a second skin, her jaw clenched hard. She was trained, disciplined, but fear lurked beneath the steel. "Why tell me?" he rasped finally. "Because," she said, "I can't trust anyone else. Not my base, not my unit, not even the police. You're the only one who has nothing to gain and nothing to lose. That makes you the most dangerous ally I've got." Gideon let the words settle. Dangerous ally. He had been a forgotten man, but she saw him as a soldier again. His chest tightened with something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The screech of tires shattered the fragile moment. Arya snapped up, eyes sharp. "They're here!" Gideon's pulse jumped as beams of flashlights sliced through the broken laundromat windows. Dark figures moved outside, silent, methodical. Whoever was hunting her wasn't just after money or leverage. They were after elimination. Arya pressed a spare magazine into Gideon's palm. "If I go down, you run. Get that drive to the media. Drop it, vanish, whatever it takes. Don't let them bury it." Gideon's hand trembled. He hadn't fired a weapon in years. His fingers closed around the magazine, cold metal against scarred skin. The rain outside slowed, the night holding its breath. Then the door burst inward, wood splintering, and the hunters poured in. The room exploded with chaos. Gunfire cracked, echoing off rusted machines. Arya rolled, firing clean, precise shots. Gideon dove behind a counter, shards of glass raining around him. His body moved without thought, old instincts carrying him like muscle memory he thought long dead. A man rushed him, knife gleaming in the dark. Gideon swung the rusted pipe from earlier, the metal crunching against bone, sending the attacker sprawling, blood mixed with rain on the tiles. Arya shouted, "Move!" Gideon scrambled beside her as bullets chewed holes through the walls. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but not broken. Arya fired one last burst, dropped the last man in the doorway, then grabbed Gideon's arm. "We can't stay here. We run. Now!" They burst into the storm again, lungs burning, shoes slapping wet pavement. And in Gideon's pocket, the flash drive felt heavier than steel. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle, but the night still carried the heavy weight of danger. Arya and Gideon sprinted down side streets, their footsteps splashing through puddles. The city, usually alive with laughter and music near the docks, now felt like a hunting ground. Gideon's lungs burned, his legs screaming from years of neglect. But adrenaline pushed him forward. Beside him, Arya ran with practiced rhythm, her movements sharp despite exhaustion. "Keep up," she urged, not slowing. Gideon clenched his jaw, his hand clutching the lining of his coat where the flash drive pressed against his chest. It felt like carrying a live grenade. Every shadow, every passing car, looked like the end. They turned into a narrow back street, ducking beneath an overhang where flickering neon read, "Vacancy," a rundown motel. "In here," Arya said, dragging him inside. The clerk barely glanced up from his radio, static buzzing. Arya slid cash across the counter. No ID, no questions. They climbed creaking stairs, the carpet stinking of mold and smoke. Inside the room, Gideon collapsed onto the edge of the bed, chest heaving. Arya locked the door, peered through the blinds, then finally lowered her weapon. She paced, restless, as if walls closed in on her. Gideon studied her, the sharpness in her eyes dulled now by fatigue. She was young, too young to be hunted like prey. "Who were those men?" he rasped. Arya hesitated, then answered. "Private contractors, bought loyalty. They're paid to silence anyone who threatens the chain. I dug too deep, and now the chain wants me cut off." Her words hung heavy in the stale motel air. For the first time, Gideon pulled the flash drive from his coat, holding it between his fingers. It was small, fragile, yet it carried the weight of something vast. "What's on this?" he asked. Arya stopped pacing, her gaze fixed on it like it was a weapon more dangerous than her pistol. "Bank transfers, names of officers selling intelligence to foreign hands, a smuggling route disguised as aid shipments, and evidence that the one signing off is Admiral Cale Draven." She exhaled sharply, as if saying the name out loud might summon the man himself. Gideon frowned, the name sparking a faint memory, an admiral decorated for countless operations, praised as a patriot. "You're saying your own command is dirty?" Arya nodded once. "Grim. And they'll burn cities to keep it hidden." Gideon stared at the drive. The irony clawed at him. Once he'd fought wars for his country. Now he held proof that some of its highest protectors sold it piece by piece. "So why not go to someone higher?" he asked. Arya sat across from him, her voice low. "I tried. The moment I sent word up the chain, the threat started. My email wiped. My apartment broken into. Tonight wasn't chance. They knew exactly where I'd be. There's no one left to trust, except you." Gideon shifted uncomfortably, his soaked coat clinging to him. He had nothing to offer. No home, no power, no voice. Yet here she was, handing him the burden of truth. He let out a dry laugh. "You picked the wrong man." Arya shook her head. "I picked the only man they'd never suspect." The hum of a car engine outside snapped their eyes to the window. Arya lifted her weapon again, her body coiled tight. Gideon's gut knotted. He peeked through the blinds, heart hammering. A dark sedan sat idle across the street, its headlights off, but its engine purring steady. A watcher. Arya cursed under her breath. "They tracked us." She paced quickly, eyes scanning the room, calculating exits. Gideon felt his pulse thunder, old instincts roaring awake. "So what now?" he asked. Arya turned to him, her face hardening into command. "Now, we stop running, we make them chase ghosts." She pointed at the flash drive. "That drive is survival, and as long as you hold it, Gideon, you're no longer invisible. You're a soldier again, whether you like it or not." The sedan outside didn't move. Its idle hum became a ticking clock, each second gnawing at Gideon's nerves. Arya kept her pistol steady, eyes fixed on the blinds. Gideon shifted on the bed, uneasy, the flash drive still heavy in his palm. The room smelled of mildew and stale smoke, the air too thick to breathe. "They're waiting for us to panic," Arya whispered, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. Gideon glanced at her, seeing not just a Navy officer, but a woman who had burned every bridge for the truth. He muttered, "Then what? We sit here until they kick the door in." Arya finally turned, jaw clenched. "No, we make them believe we're still inside when we're already gone." Her words lit a fire in Gideon, the soldier in him stirring from years of slumber. She moved swiftly, pulling the lampshade off a dusty lamp and yanking the curtain rod free. With duct tape she found under the sink, she rigged a crude decoy, propping the lamp by the window. From outside, the silhouette looked like someone watching from the blinds. "That'll buy us a minute," she said. Gideon grunted in approval. Improvisation, the mark of someone who had seen combat up close. He pulled his hood low, readying himself. Arya slid her pistol into its holster, then reached for Gideon's arm. Her hand was firm, grounding. "When we go, stay low, stay silent. If you fall behind, you're dead." Gideon nodded, a familiar grimness settling over him. He had heard those words before, in another life, whispered before breaching doors half a world away. They slipped into the hallway, shoes muffled against the stained carpet. The motel groaned with age, each creak threatening to give them away. Gideon's breath caught as they passed one door slightly ajar. Eyes glinted from within. A guest, a shadowy figure, watching them but saying nothing. Gideon's pulse jumped, but Araya's grip on his arm kept him steady. Down the stairs they crept, the exit sign glowing weakly red above the lobby door. The clerk was gone. The radio still buzzed static on the counter, abandoned mid-song. Outside, headlights swept across the lot, another vehicle joining the first. "They brought backup," Arya muttered. Gideon's heart thundered. 2 cars meant at least 6 men, maybe more. He whispered, "We're boxed in." Arya shook her head. "Not yet." "Follow me." She pushed open the fire exit, leading him into the storm-soaked alley behind the motel. The alley reeked of oil and trash, puddles glinting under the faint glow of street lamps. Arya moved like a shadow, her uniform blending into the wet night. Gideon trailed close, clutching the flash drive, every muscle screaming to move faster. Behind them, footsteps echoed, quick, heavy, deliberate. Gideon froze. They'd been spotted. Arya cursed under her breath, shoved him forward. "Run!" A shot cracked, ricocheting off the dumpster beside them. Gideon ducked instinctively, memories of combat roaring back. The hunters had no hesitation, no concern for noise. Their weapons coughed suppressed fire, bullets slicing the air. Gideon grabbed Arya's hand, yanking her toward a chain-link fence. Together they scrambled up, boots slipping on wet metal. A bullet tore through his coat, grazing his side, but he didn't stop. They dropped onto the other side, hitting the ground hard. They sprinted through back streets, weaving through shadows, hearts pounding in rhythm with the storm. Arya finally slowed, dragging Gideon into the cover of an abandoned warehouse. Inside, the air was thick with dust and rust, broken machinery looming like skeletons. She pressed him against the wall, her face inches from his, breath ragged. "They're not stopping," she whispered. Gideon held the flash drive tighter, the weight of it like destiny pressing into his hand. His body trembled, not from fear but from awakening. He wasn't just a forgotten man anymore. The war had found him again, and with it, a mission. Arya's eyes blazed with the same fire. "We fight smarter, not harder. They want the drive? They'll have to bury me first." Gideon looked at her, rain dripping from his lashes, and felt something he hadn't in years: belonging. But outside, the engines roared closer. The hunters were converging. The standoff had only just begun. The warehouse creaked under the weight of years, its broken rafters dripping rainwater into wide, echoing puddles. Gideon pressed his back to a rusted column, chest heaving, the flash drive digging into his palm. The hunters were closing in, their boots scuffing on asphalt outside, their low voices cutting through the storm. Arya crouched opposite him, her pistol steady, eyes hard. The dim light from the broken skylights painted her features sharp with grit. "They'll sweep in fast," she whispered. "We've got one chance. Make them believe we're more than 2. Gideon swallowed hard, nodding. His hands shook, but deep inside, the part of him that had once survived ambushes began to stir awake. The hunter's engine cut off outside. Silence. Then a door slammed open with a metallic shriek. Shadows spilled into the warehouse like predators. The first man moved slow, scanning, his rifle fitted with a suppressor, laser sight twitching across the concrete. Gideon held his breath, his back slick with sweat. Arya's hand signaled, "Wait." Two more men fanned out, steps deliberate, methodical. They weren't amateurs, they were trained, disciplined, maybe ex-military like himself. Gideon's stomach twisted at the thought of facing men who once wore the same flag. He looked at Arya, saw her jaw tighten, her focus absolute. She lifted a shard of glass and tossed it across the floor. It clattered, echoing like a dropped weapon. Instantly, the hunters swung toward the sound, weapons raised. Arya sprang from cover, firing quick bursts. Two men down before they registered her. Gideon surged forward, pipe in hand, slamming it against the rifle of the third man. The impact rattled his bones, but the weapon clattered away. He followed with a brutal swing, knocking the attacker into a pile of rusted crates. The warehouse exploded in chaos. Bullets ripped through rotted wood, sparks flying as they struck old metal. Gideon dove, rolling behind a forklift, his lungs burning. Another hunter barreled toward him, knife flashing. Instinct guided Gideon's hand. He jammed the pipe upward, catching the man under the ribs. The attacker fell, groaning, the knife skittering away. Gideon gripped it, surprised at how natural the weight felt in his hand. Across the room, Arya fought with precise fury, each shot controlled, each movement tactical. But more shadows poured in through the side door. They were being surrounded. Gideon's chest tightened. "Too many," he rasped. Arya reloaded, calm despite the storm of violence. "Then we use their numbers against them." She pointed toward a stack of crates marked flammable. Gideon understood instantly. Together they crawled toward the crates under cover of gunfire. Gideon tore open a valve on an old fuel drum, the stench of gasoline flooding the air. Bullets sparked around them, one grazing Arya's shoulder. She hissed but didn't falter. "On my mark," she whispered. Gideon ripped a rag from his coat, soaking it, his hands moving like they had in another war. Arya lit the rag with her lighter, shoved it into his grip. The hunters advanced, eyes glinting in the half-light, muzzles raised. "Now!" Arya shouted. Gideon hurled the burning rag into the leaking fuel. The explosion roared, fire blooming across the warehouse floor, a wall of flame cutting the hunters off. Screams echoed as they scrambled for cover. The building trembled with the force, smoke curling toward the ceiling. Gideon shielded his face from the heat, heart pounding. Through the fire and chaos, Arya grabbed his arm, dragging him toward a side exit. They burst into the rain again, coughing, their faces smeared with soot. The warehouse behind them glowed orange, flames licking skyward, sirens beginning to wail in the distance. Gideon staggered, the flash drive still safe in his coat. Arya's wound bled through her sleeve, but her eyes burned with determination. She didn't slow, didn't falter. "That'll buy us minutes, not hours," she said grimly. Gideon nodded, chest tight. He hadn't felt this alive, this terrified in years. Together they slipped into the maze of alleys, hunted still, but unbroken. The storm raged on, washing blood and ash from their faces. And deep inside, Gideon knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was war, and for the first time in years, he had a mission again. The storm had thinned to a mist, but Gideon and Arya were soaked through, their clothes clinging heavy. They stumbled into the skeleton of an old shipyard, cranes looming like dead giants against the night sky. Arya's breathing was ragged, her hand pressed tight against her bleeding shoulder. Gideon's eyes scanned constantly. Every shadow was a threat, every sound a warning. He gripped the flash drive like a lifeline, its edges biting into his palm. "We can't keep running," he muttered. Arya leaned against a shipping container, wincing. "You're right. I need a medic." Her voice cracked, the iron edge faltering. Gideon frowned. "Where?" Arya hesitated, then whispered, "There's one person I trust, ex-Navy corpsman. But if I take you to him, you'll see how deep this goes." Gideon's jaw tightened. "Then show me." He was in this now, whether by chance or by fate. They moved cautiously through the maze of containers, finally reaching a shack lit by a single flickering bulb. Arya knocked twice, paused, then once more. A chain rattled, the door creaked open, and a tall man with a salt and pepper beard peered out. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Arya! Damn it, girl, what have you done?" His voice was rough but carried concern. She staggered forward, whispering, "Elias, need your hands." He pulled her inside, his gaze landing on Gideon. Suspicion flared. "And who's this stray?" Gideon met his eyes, tired but steady. "The one keeping her alive." For a tense second, neither man blinked. Then Elias sighed, shutting the door. "Fine, but if you brought hell to my doorstep, you'll answer for it." He motioned them in, his shack cluttered with medical kits, old Navy gear, and maps pinned to the walls. Elias laid Arya on a cot, cutting away the soaked fabric from her shoulder. The wound was deep but clean, no shattered bone. Still, Arya's face paled as Elias worked, stitching with precise, practiced hands. Gideon stood nearby, restless, watching the door. "She said you can be trusted," he said low. Elias didn't look up. "Trust died the moment I left the Navy. But Arya, she's like a daughter to me. If she's in this mess, it means someone at the top is rotten." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "Admiral Draven." Elias's hands paused briefly before continuing. "So it's true," he muttered. "I heard whispers. Shipments vanishing. Quiet deaths. If Draven's running this, it's bigger than both of you." Arya stirred, whispering, "We need the drive out, before they bury it with us." Elias glanced at Gideon, curiosity flickering. "She trusts you with that thing? You must be more than you look." Gideon's lips curled in a humorless smile. "Once? Maybe." When Elias finished, Arya sat up slowly, pale but determined. "We can't stay long," she said. Elias shook his head. "Running blind won't save you. They'll track you with every camera, every drone in the city. You need to go dark, real dark." He crossed to a trunk, pulling out a battered duffel bag. Inside lay gear, old radios, smoke grenades, and tactical vests. He tossed one at Gideon. "Suit up. If you're going to play soldier again, you might as well look the part." Gideon hesitated, the weight of the vest heavy in his hands. It had been years since he wore anything like it. Sliding it on, he felt old scars ache, but also something else, a spark, purpose. Arya watched him, a faint smile ghosting her lips despite the pain. "Told you," she murmured. "Dangerous ally." Gideon met her gaze, no words needed. But peace didn't last. The whine of an approaching drone cut through the night, its red eye scanning from above. Elias swore. "They've found you." He yanked the blinds shut, grabbed his rifle from the wall. "I'll hold them off. You two move now." Arya shook her head weakly. "No, you'll be killed." Elias's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "I've lived long enough to know when to make it count. Go. Get that drive to daylight." He shoved open a hidden trapdoor in the floor, leading into the dark guts of the shipyard tunnels. Gideon grabbed Arya, guiding her down. The last thing he saw before Elias closed the hatch was the old corpsman, rifle raised, jaw set. Moments later, gunfire erupted above, sharp and furious. The tunnels swallowed them in blackness. Arya gripped Gideon's arm, whispering through clenched teeth, "We can't let his sacrifice be wasted." Gideon's chest ached, the weight of war pressing heavy. He nodded once. The mission had just claimed another soul. The tunnels swallowed them whole, pitch black, damp, and suffocating. Rusted pipes lined the walls, dripping foul water into ankle-deep pools. Gideon gripped Arya's wrist, guiding her step by step through the darkness. His other hand brushed the wall, keeping them steady. The air smelled of rust and mold, heavy with silence except for their ragged breaths. Behind them, muffled gunfire echoed faintly, Elias's last stand. Gideon clenched his jaw, each shot a reminder of sacrifice. Arya stumbled, her wound slowing her, but she didn't complain. Her voice came low, almost a whisper. "He's gone, isn't he?" Gideon didn't answer. Silence said enough. She squeezed his hand, grief flickering in her eyes. But she pressed on. The mission was bigger than pain, bigger than either of them. The tunnel forked into two paths, both black as night. Gideon hesitated, instincts sparking. He crouched low, listening. The faint hum of machinery drifted from the left, while the right was eerily silent. He weighed the options. The hum meant power, maybe an exit, but it also meant danger. Arya watched him, waiting for his call. Left, he whispered finally. They crept down the corridor, the hum growing louder, vibrating through the steel walls. As they rounded a bend, a faint red glow appeared, an emergency light flickering weakly above a ladder. Up, Arya breathed. Gideon boosted her, his muscles straining. She climbed slow, every movement deliberate, before pushing open the grate above. Cool night air rushed in. Relief was short-lived. The moment they surfaced into the open yard, a drone spotlight swept across them, bathing them in harsh white. Down, Gideon barked, shoving Arya flat. Bullets tore into the ground where they'd stood, concrete splintering. The drone whirred, circling like a predator. Gideon grabbed a broken brick, hurling it into the shadows. The machine's sensors followed the sound, guns rattling into empty space. Move, Arya hissed, dragging herself behind a stack of pallets. Gideon crawled beside her, heart hammering. The drone pivoted back, its red eye scanning. Gideon's gaze darted to a steel rod on the ground. He snatched it, waited, then flung it into the drone's path just as it descended. The rod jammed the rotor with a screech, the machine spiraling before exploding against the pavement. The fireball lit the yard, revealing more. Black SUVs skidding into position, hunters pouring out like shadows given flesh. Arya cursed, gripping her pistol tighter. Gideon's chest tightened. They weren't out of the tunnels. They'd walked into another trap. Gunfire erupted. Deafening. Arya fired controlled bursts, dropping one hunter, then another. Gideon grabbed a discarded sidearm from a fallen attacker, the cold weight fitting back into his hand like it had never left. His body moved with instinct. Aim, fire, shift. Years of rust cracked away under adrenaline. A man lunged from the side, blade raised. Gideon slammed him with the butt of the pistol, twisting to fire at another closing from behind. The yard became chaos. Shouts, muzzle flashes, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with rain. Arya stumbled, her wounded shoulder slowing her reload. Gideon covered her, his shots sharp, efficient. He felt the soldier in him fully awake now, every nerve alive. "Stay with me," he shouted over the roar. Arya's eyes burned with defiance. "I'm not leaving you." Together they fought, backs nearly touching, a storm against the storm. But numbers pressed heavy. For every man they dropped, two more advanced. Gideon's magazine clicked empty. He dove for cover, sweat and rain blinding him. Arya ducked behind a crate, returning fire, but their perimeter shrank with each second. Then out of the corner of his eye, Gideon spotted salvation, or madness. A fuel truck sat idle near the edge of the yard, hoses dangling, a faded Navy logo still visible. He shouted, "The truck! If we light it, we'll cover our escape." Arya's eyes widened, calculating the risk. A single bullet could turn the yard into a furnace, but hesitation meant death. She gave a sharp nod. Gideon scrambled, weaving through gunfire, bullets snapping at his heels. He leapt onto the truck, yanking the hose free, fuel spilling across the concrete like a dark river. Arya fired to cover him, her jaw clenched against pain. Gideon's hand trembled as he pulled a lighter from his pocket, a relic from his days on the streets. He flicked it, the flame small but defiant in the rain. "For Elias," he muttered, then dropped it. The explosion ripped through the night, a thunderous roar that shook the earth. Fire roared skyward, engulfing SUVs, hunters screaming as flames swallowed them whole. The shock wave threw Gideon and Arya across the pavement, their bodies slamming hard. For a moment, silence, only the crackle of fire and the distant wail of sirens. Gideon groaned, his body aching, ears ringing. Arya crawled to him, coughing, her uniform scorched at the edges. "You insane bastard," she wheezed, but there was a flicker of respect in her eyes. Gideon coughed, forcing a grim smile. "It worked, didn't it?" Flames painted the night, their enemies scattered or dead. But Gideon knew this was no victory, just another reprieve. He clutched the flash drive close, the mission still alive. Arya leaned against him, her voice hoarse but steady. We keep moving. This war doesn't end tonight. Gideon stared into the inferno, feeling the soldiers' fire rekindle inside him. For the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. He was back in the fight. The fire still raged behind them, a pillar of smoke curling into the sky, as if to signal their location to every enemy within miles. Gideon pulled Arya along the rain-slick streets, both of them staggering from exhaustion and the concussive blast. His ribs ached from the fall, each breath sharp, but he forced his body forward. The flash drive pressed against his chest like a burning coal. Arya leaned heavily against him, her shoulder wound reopening from the fight. We can't stop, she gasped. Gideon scanned the streets. Empty storefronts, broken neon signs, the skeleton of a forgotten district near the docks. We need wheel, he muttered. As if fate answered, a pickup sat parked with keys dangling in the ignition, its owner long gone. Gideon shoved Arya inside, slid behind the wheel, and gunned the engine. The tires squealed, carrying them into the night, but safety was a lie. In the rearview mirror, headlights flared. Black SUVs, battered but alive, swarming like wolves, refusing to give up the chase. Arya cursed under her breath, gripping the dash. They don't quit. Gideon's jaw tightened. His hands remembered the feel of Humvees roaring through deserts, convoys ambushed under moonlight. He swerved hard, ducking into narrow streets, engines roaring behind them. Bullets pinged off the truck's tailgate, sparks flying. Gideon growled, "Hold on!" and cut through an alley barely wide enough, scraping the mirrors. The hunters followed without hesitation. Arya rolled the window down, leaning out despite the pain, firing controlled shots. One SUV swerved, slammed into a wall, but two more closed in. Rain hammered the windshield, blurring Gideon's view. He leaned into instinct, heart pounding, muscles alive again. They tore through the industrial outskirts, chasing shadows of freedom. Ahead, train tracks cut across the road, lights flashing, a freight train thundering closer. Gideon's eyes locked on it, timing the impossible. Arya shouted, "Don't you dare!" He pressed the pedal flat, engine screaming. The pickup leapt forward, bouncing across the tracks just as the train roared past, metal screaming. The SUVs behind weren't so lucky. One slammed into the side of the train, bursting in sparks, another screeching to a halt. Gideon grinned through the sweat and rain, adrenaline surging. Arya laughed once, breathless, part terror, part relief. But the third SUV had found another path, headlights slicing through the dark, unrelenting. Gideon growled, "Persistent bastards!" He swerved toward the coastline, the salty wind cutting through the cab. Arya's voice steadied. "There's a safe house 2 miles ahead, if we make it." The safe house was nothing more than a rusted boathouse perched on the edge of the bay. But Arya's eyes lit with recognition as they pulled up. Gideon killed the lights, coasted the truck behind the building. For a moment, silence returned, broken only by the waves crashing against the pier. Gideon's hands trembled on the wheel, the weight of combat settling heavy. Arya placed a hand on his arm, her voice softer now. "You did good." He turned, surprised by the words. For years he had been forgotten, dismissed as nothing. Now in the fire of survival, he mattered again. "I'm not who I was," he said quietly. Arya's eyes locked on his. "Maybe not, but you're exactly who I need right now." Before Gideon could answer, the rumble of an approaching engine shattered the fragile calm. Headlights cut across the waves. The third SUV had found them. They scrambled inside the boathouse, the floorboards creaking under their boots. The air reeked of salt and oil, nets and ropes hanging from beams. Gideon shoved crates against the door as Arya reloaded her pistol with shaky hands. The SUV's doors slammed outside, boots hitting gravel. Voices called out, low and commanding. Gideon gripped the flash drive tighter. This wasn't just running anymore. This was the final stand before dawn. He glanced at Arya, her face pale but fierce. "We make it through this," he said. "We end it on our terms." She gave a sharp nod, eyes blazing. The hunters closed in, shadows moving against the glow of the headlights. Gideon steadied his breath, every nerve alive, every muscle tight. The soldier was awake, fully, completely. He was no longer invisible. He was back in the fight, and this time he would not let go. The boathouse groaned in the storm, its walls trembling as if it knew the violence about to erupt inside. Gideon pressed his back against a stack of crates, pistol steady, ears tuned to every sound. Outside, boots crunched on gravel, measured and deliberate. The hunters were disciplined, their voices clipped as they fanned out. Arya crouched by the window, eyes burning with defiance, her hand pressed against her wounded shoulder. She whispered, "We can't outgun them. We outthink them." Gideon nodded, his jaw tight. The flash drive pressed against his chest, a reminder of why this mattered. Every second he held it, he wasn't just a forgotten man. He was a soldier again, guarding a truth too heavy for one person to carry. The first window shattered, glass spraying into the room. Gideon fired instinctively, his shot snapping a shadow back into the storm. Arya spun, returning fire, her muzzle flashing in bursts. More hunters surged through the side door, weapons coughing suppressed fire. Gideon dove behind a beam, wood splintering inches from his head. His body moved without hesitation, the old instincts guiding him like muscle memory. Count rounds, shift position, control the rhythm. He dropped one, then another, the recoil familiar and grounding. Arya flanked from the side, her shots sharp, precise, each movement practiced. But they were outnumbered, and with every body that fell, more shadows filled the breach. Gideon felt the tide turning, the walls closing in. Then his eyes caught the fuel drums stacked near the dock. An idea sparked. Reckless, dangerous, but survival was never safe. He shouted to Arya over the roar of gunfire, "The drums! Blow the dock!" She glanced, understanding immediately, and gave a sharp nod. Gideon crawled through a hail of bullets, his vest tearing, his ribs screaming. He yanked a flare from a toolbox, the red light hissing to life. Bullets whined past, one grazing his arm, blood slick on his sleeve. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain, and rolled the flare toward the drums. The hunters saw too late. The explosion ripped through the dock, fire roaring upward, the floor beneath them quaking. Flames swallowed half the attackers, the rest thrown into the bay with screams drowned by the storm. The boathouse shook violently, wood groaning, water rushing through broken planks. Arya stumbled toward him, coughing through smoke, eyes watering. "You're insane," she rasped, but her lips curled into the faintest smile. Gideon staggered, pulling her close as the boathouse shuddered under collapsing beams. The remaining hunters regrouped outside, their silhouettes pacing against the fire's glow. They weren't retreating, they were waiting. Arya leaned against him, whispering hoarsely, "Draven sent them. He won't stop until he has the drive." Gideon clenched his fist around it. "Then he'll have to go through me." He pulled her toward the water's edge, scanning for an escape. A small motorboat bobbed at the pier, half submerged, but it was their only chance. Gideon shoved Arya aboard, untying the frayed rope. Bullets peppered the water as he leapt in after her. He yanked the cord. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. They sped into the bay, waves crashing, fire behind them painting the night in blood and gold. But as the shoreline receded, Gideon's stomach tightened. Ahead, another vessel cut across the water, a sleek black patrol boat bristling with weapons, its spotlight slicing through the rain. Arya's face hardened, her hand gripping her pistol, though she knew it was no match. Gideon's chest burned with rage and defiance. He had fought too hard, lost too much to surrender now. The flash drive was warm against his chest, a reminder of Elias's sacrifice, of Arya's trust, of his own return from invisibility. The patrol boat bore down on them, its engines snarling, voices shouting over the storm. Gideon's knuckles whitened on the wheel, his voice low and steady. One last stand. Arya's eyes met his, fire answering fire. The bay stretched before them like a battlefield, and Gideon knew the final fight was coming. The patrol boat bore down on them, cutting through the black waters like a predator, its spotlight flooding the bay in harsh white. Gideon's hands clenched the wheel of the sputtering motorboat, his ribs aching, his coat torn, the flash drive heavy against his chest. Arya crouched beside him, her pistol drawn, though both knew its range was useless against the armored beast. Rain lashed them, waves slamming the hull, but Gideon's gaze stayed locked on the oncoming threat. "We can't outrun them," Arya said through clenched teeth. Gideon's voice was gravel, steady, resolved. "Then we don't run." His mind raced, eyes flicking to the shoreline. An old pier half collapsed, wooden beams jutting into the water like broken teeth. He angled the boat toward it, his jaw set. "Hold on!" The patrol boat opened fire, rounds slamming into the water around them. Geysers rising in the storm. Arya ducked, her wounded shoulder pressed against her chest, grimacing in pain. Gideon pushed the motor harder, the engine screaming as they veered toward the pier. The hunters shouted, confident of victory. But Gideon had learned something tonight. Survival was never about strength. It was about desperation, sharpened into purpose. He shouted, "Brace!" and rammed the boat hard against the rotted pier. Wood exploded, splinters flying, the hull shattering. Gideon grabbed Arya, hauling her onto the collapsing beams as their boat sank beneath them. The patrol vessel swerved, engines roaring, circling back for the kill. Gideon's chest burned, lungs heaving, but his grip on the flash drive never faltered. He pressed it into Arya's trembling hand. "If I don't make it, get this out. Promise me." Her eyes widened. "No. We finish this together." The patrol boat's spotlight blinded them as it drew closer, men with rifles leaning over the rails. Arya steadied her pistol, jaw set, but Gideon's gaze shifted to the pier itself, the old fuel barrels stacked at the end, half submerged and forgotten. Rainwater streamed down his face as an idea sparked, dangerous and final. He pulled Arya close, his voice low, urgent. "When I move, you run. Don't look back." She shook her head violently, tears mixing with the storm. "I won't leave you." Gideon gripped her shoulders, his eyes fierce. "You already saved me the moment you gave me this mission. Don't waste it." He pressed the flash drive into her vest, then shoved her toward the shadows of the pier. The hunters shouted, their rifles raising. Gideon stood tall on the beam, silhouetted against firelight and storm. The soldier who had once been invisible was visible again, undeniable. Bullets ripped through the air as Gideon sprinted along the collapsing pier, weaving between broken beams. He dove behind the barrels, sparks flying as rounds slammed into metal. His hands moved with steady precision, pulling the last flare from his pocket. The red light hissed to life, glowing against the storm. He rose to his feet, the hunters shouting, rifles trained. Gideon bared his teeth, a grim smile on his scarred face. "For Elias, for every name on this drive, for the country you tried to sell." And with that, he hurled the flare into the barrels. The explosion was deafening, a wall of fire erupting skyward, engulfing the patrol boat in a storm of flame and steel. The shockwave hurled Gideon backward, the pier splintering beneath him. The last thing he felt was the heat, searing and pure, as the world dissolved into fire. From the shadows, Arya shielded her face. The flash drive clutched against her chest as the night lit up brighter than day. The patrol boat disintegrated in the blast, bodies in steel swallowed by the bay. The pier collapsed into the waves, flames hissing against rain. "Gideon!" she screamed, her voice cracking. But only silence answered. Smoke rolled across the water, carrying the scent of salt and sacrifice. Arya fell to her knees, tears streaming, the weight of survival crushing her chest. She pulled the flash drive from her vest, her grip trembling. Gideon's words echoed in her ears. "Don't waste it." Her shoulders squared, her jaw tightening. Through pain and grief, resolve burned. She would deliver it. She would finish what he died to protect. And somewhere in the storm's howl, she thought she heard his voice, steady and proud. "Mission complete.